Cool. So hi, everybody, and welcome to this emergency briefing and digital action surrounding the current water and infrastructure crisis in Illinois prisons. My name is Alex. I am a community organizer with the Coalition to Decarcerate Illinois. And so today you will be hearing from formerly incarcerated activist and organizer for the Chicago Torture Justice Center, Mark Clements, Jeffrey Dixon, or myself if he's unable to make it, from the Illinois Environmental Council, an environmental organizer from East St. Louis area, and then Alan Mills, our executive director of the Uptown People's Law Center. Cool. Kia, Kursula, are you able to see folks that are joining? Cool. Great. Thank you. So again, please just keep yourself muted. We will have times for questions and answer. You could please also put those in the chat so we could get to those. Today's event will end with a guided digital action that I will lead you in. There's a few logistical things. If you have questions, again, you can direct them to Kia Sandler in the chat. You could do a direct message, or public. We do have a tight time frame and several speakers, and so we will be muting folks throughout the event. Just know that. And we are recording, so we will share this widely after. Our social media handles and website will also be shared in the chat throughout the event, so please tag us in anything, Coalition to Decarcerate Illinois. We appreciate the press and any lawmakers that have joined us concerning this issue and what they can continue to do to support change within IDOC. So to all those who are in attendance, we hope that you can gain a lot of knowledge today about the current water and infrastructure crisis in our prisons and feel called to educate others and act. And I will now pass it off to Mark Clements to start us off. And thank you all so much for being here.
Hello, my name is Mark Clements, and I am with the Chicago Torture Justice Center, also with Decarcerate Illinois. I'm pretty sure that many of you have heard of the difficult crisis that many are faced with who are incarcerated at the Stateville Correctional Facility. Recent history. The water at Stateville has been very awful, and not only has it been very awful, but many people have complained of the water coming out brown or yellow out of the faucets. We met with Camille Lindsay approximately 3 months ago. And at that particular time, she had basically stated that the water had been tested, and to her knowledge, nothing was wrong with the water. However, I would say maybe a week later, some type of analyst report was released by IDOC, but however, it is showing that it was done incorrectly. And as a result of being done incorrectly, what it basically permitted is for people to be further exposed. Being a formerly incarcerated person and spending over 22 years of my life at Stateville, I can tell you right now, that's why a lot of them don't like to talk to me. The conditions are very harsh. The conditions are very cruel. Prison officials get away with it. Now faced with the, I have problems announcing this name, the Legionnaires disease, at least the bacteria that is roaming inside of Stateville prison. I can tell you from experience, that bacteria has been in that facility for a very, very long time. It also was revealed that this bacteria affected individuals who are at the Joliet Treatment Center, as well as some parts of Stateville Prison. I believe solely that Stateville needs to be closed. That's the only option. That is what I am advocating to lawmakers during meetings. Close this sucker down. As we move from Stateville and closing it down, I believe that we need to move to Pontiac and to Menard, or it could start from Menard, Pontiac. However, these are prisons that are cruel. The conditions are harsh. They have been deteriorating for, man, ever since I stepped entrance inside of the place. And it has been permitted to continue. Let's keep in mind that also this affects individuals that are dealing with medical situations, such as a well-known name that is surfacing, Johnny Berzal. Johnny Berzal has all sorts of medical issues. You know, I would really like to know, is some of his illnesses contributed to this water? But we must continue to fight as a people, and we must understand these are our loved ones or our comrades, or these are people from our community. And if we do nothing, then the criminal justice system, they win as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I will now give some background of what is Legionnaire's disease. What is Legionella, right? I had never heard of this as well before this was brought to our attention. Alan Mills and many others made it very apparent, and will spread more information, but just some information shared by the Natural Resource Defense Council. What is Legionella? Legionella is a type of bacteria that can be found in the natural environment and in man-made water systems. There is no known safe level of Legionella in a building water system. Some recent cases of Legionnaire's disease have been associated with very low concentrations of Legionella, and Legionnaire's disease affects and kills more people in the United States than any other reportable waterborne disease. So, right, these two things, which with what I just said, I'll just throw in the chat, are very important to note. Legionella can be found in a variety of man-made systems, drinking water distribution systems, building plumbing systems, cooling towers, water storage towers, and factors like warm temperatures, stagnant water, and a lack of chemical disinfectants also seem to make it more likely. And so what is this disease and what are the symptoms? Often people contract it after being exposed to the bacteria, typically through inhalation of small water droplets containing the bacteria. So in prisons, we can imagine this would be most likely happen via showers and through the water vapor. And there's also like pools of stagnant water, right, in the showers, right? Most of our showers drain, but in many prisons, they do not. There's just like lots of stagnant water. So Legionnaire's disease usually manifests as a severe form of pneumonia that can result in a septic shock, respiratory failure, acute kidney failure, and death. Early symptoms can look like a headache. You know, some folks might have a fever, dry cough, confusion, disorientation, nausea, vomiting. So there's definitely a lot of symptoms that can be seen and addressed. And so how is Legionella in water usually regulated? The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, so the EPA, regulates Legionella in drinking water under our Safe Drinking Water Act currently. So the EPA has established treatment requirements in lieu of a maximum contaminant levels for Legionella in public drinking water. So they have treatment requirements, right? And so if Legionella is found in public drinking water systems, it would be considered a violation of our Safe Drinking Water Act and associated regulations. So the EPA considers public drinking water systems in compliance as long as they fulfill certain disinfection and filtration requirements. So in Illinois, those requirements are administered and enforced through the Illinois Pollution Control Board and the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. The Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, which did a faulty report of the water in our prisons, right? So the folks that are responsible for holding these Safe Drinking Water Act up in our state are the ones that are putting out faulty reports and are untrustworthy, unfortunately. And so, however, there are no water management regulations or requirements associated with reducing Legionella risk for either building water systems or at large detention facility water systems. Although the CDC has issued guidance on building water management to avoid the growth and spread of Legionella, right? So there's a lot of information out here about what to do about this, right? It's not new by any means. And at this moment, the EPA, the Illinois Department of Public Health does not have access to IDOC, right? Many people don't know that the Illinois Department of Public Health has access to so many places, but not our prisons, which seems like a very big issue. And so how does it spread and what can be done to address it? It can be found right in localized water sources, hot water tanks, pools, and it can originate in public water systems and then enter and colonize in individual buildings like hospitals, nursing homes, and prisons. And so water systems treat their water with chlorine to ensure that bacteria like Legionella doesn't grow and spread within the water. However, changes to the water system's treatment process can occasionally cause Legionella to proliferate in the system or at certain dead ends where water is just sitting for a long period of time and there's no chlorine or they're very low levels of chlorine. So these prison facilities clearly have decaying infrastructure, right? And need to be shut down. People need to be released, transferred, and these dead end pipes and other faulty devices that may cause water to stagnate within the system need to be removed because they're in every prison system. All of these infrastructures are very old and have a lot of these dead end type pipes. And since this issue seems so far spread, right? It started as just talking about Stateville prison, but now there are several other prisons that have reported positive cases that Alan will speak to as well. But we really believe that the Federal Election Protection Agency and the Illinois Department of Public Health need to get, especially the Illinois Department of Public Health, need to get into our prison system, and they need to do a full report and assessment of what's going on in there. Because the Illinois EPA has not done that effectively for us. So much needs to happen for the public health overall, right? This is a water issue, but as we know, water literally impacts almost every part of our lives, the diet, so much other medical needs, stress, right? Water is such a needed thing for us human beings, so it needs to be addressed. I'm going to pass it over to Alan, and then we will have a moment for some questions, because I know that was a lot of information.
Thank you. I just want to expand a little bit on what Mark started. I'm going to start by expanding on what Mark said. You know, Stateville Correctional Center was built in 1920, so it's now 100 years old. In 1970, they did an assessment of Stateville Correctional Center and said it had passed its useful life and should be shut down. It's no longer 1970. Obviously, they didn't close it down. It's 50 years later. Instead, they stuffed twice as many people in it. They built the 2 new units, what were then H&I House. Oddly enough, the 2 units that were built in the 80s, they closed in 2000 because they were falling apart. But the parts that were built in 1920, they still continue to operate largely with the same systems that were put in place in 1920. Not surprisingly, engineering, water systems, et cetera, have evolved since 1920. Nobody has the same infrastructure. And when they do, that's when you find places like Flint, where it turns out that the whole system is poisoning people. You know, Stateville originally came to our attention not because of the Legionella bacteria, but because of lead and copper in the pipes or in the drinking water. That was bad enough, and there was lots of dispute and continues to be dispute about the way they're testing those and the fact that they are not in fact testing them properly. We filed a lawsuit about in our sea, because the water there we thought was a problem with the lead and the copper. Little did we know they had a bigger and much more immediate problem. So far, I think the only place that the IDOC has admitted that they found the Legionella bacteria, almost as bad as Mark, Legionella bacteria, is in one cell in Sea House at Stateville. That's, for those of you who don't intimately familiar with State House, there's one big long cell house which has been split into 4 parts. So there's B, C, D, and E there. They say it's only in the Sea House and only in one cell. I don't want to say that I'm in any way a water engineer or expert on buildings, but it seems extremely unlikely to me, given the way that the plumbing system works at Stateville, that it's limited to one cell. The water goes through, those houses are built back to back so that the cells face out, and then the plumbing is all behind in a space between those two, each cell who's back to back. And it's in that area that the plumbing is all located, and it serves the entire cell house. And then, of course, all of Stateville is served by the same water tower. So the key, from my point of view, is what they should be doing, or should have already done, is testing not just one cell, but hundreds of cells throughout that cell house, not just C house, but B, C, D, and E house. And until you do that kind of testing to see how widespread it is, there's no way you can figure out where the source is. Is it a dead-end pipe in C house? Is it a dead-end pipe near that particular cell? Maybe that's a problem. Maybe it's the water tower that serves the whole place. San Quentin, a couple of years ago, had exactly the same thing happen. They took a much more aggressive stance there. They located the source of it in the water tower that serves San Quentin, figuring out it hadn't been flushed and it was just allowing bacteria to grow inside of it. And then it got spread throughout the whole prison from the water tower. Stateville has the same sort of water tower system as how Stateville is done. So maybe that's the problem, but we don't know. And that's the problem. They have this sort of what I call fake transparency, where they send out a memo to everybody saying it's being found, but they don't actually give you the information they need. Just like they have a sort of fake response. So they've agreed to give out water bottles to people to have drinking water. But frankly, it's not the drinking water that's the biggest problem. And of course, they're not actually doing that either, but at least they say they're doing that. But the Legionnaires disease mainly, as Alexa just said, comes from breathing it in, not from ingesting it. The lucky thing is, if you drink it, then some of the bacteria or some of the acids in your stomach kill off a lot of the bacteria. If you inhale it, it goes right into your lungs, and that's when it's really dangerous. So showers are an obvious source, because that's the place that you have steam. You inhale that steam, those droplets have the Legionella bacteria to it, and it can go right through your nose, right down into your lungs. And that's when it's a problem. And of course, they're not giving anybody an alternative to shower. They're not telling people not to shower. That seems to me a much more serious problem than the fact that they found it in one cell. I'm afraid that this is an iceberg, and we've only seen the very tip of that iceberg, but the big part of the iceberg that sinks the Titanic is still hidden from view. That's why I call it sort of fake transparency. They try to be transparent, but they actually don't give you the information you really need. I think the other thing that they're saying that there is no one at Stateville has shown any signs or symptoms. But of course, they're not doing good screening, and we know they can't really do good screening. And this reminds me far too much of the early days of COVID, when, as you all may recall, they had to bring in the National Guard just to take people's temperature, which they're not doing. So, that to me is a serious problem. They should be doing a much more thorough medical screening of everybody to identify all of the symptoms that Alexandria just read off. And anybody who has any of those symptoms, you should be testing to see whether or not they've actually got the bacteria growing. You want to catch these things early so you can treat it with antibiotics. It's when you don't recognize what you've got and you let it fester in your body for a while that it's a problem. And, sadly, I know all too well, because we have another class action case on that, just how bad the medical care is throughout Illinois, not just at this prison. So that's what I would say about Stateville, what they say they're doing. And I this is secondhand, so I can't vouch for the accuracy of it. But what they say they've done is they put out an emergency contract to an engineering firm to do the sort of analysis that's needed to try to figure out where it is. Great. I hope that's being done on an emergency basis. I hope they get in there. I hope they staff it right so they can do it in a day or two instead of dragging it out for 6 months. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the way the IDOC works. They often go for the sort of low bid idea, and it therefore takes them months and months and months to get anything done. I hope they're treating this as the kind of emergency it is. They also say that they're flushing various water systems, but until you know where the problem is, I'm not sure what you're choosing to flush. So, you know, if they're only flushing the water from the one cell they found it in, that may or may not solve the problem. I mean, I hope it's only in one cell, and I hope that that solves the problem, but I'm certainly not going to put my faith in the fact that it's only in one cell until they do widespread hundreds of cells testing, monitoring. And frankly, this is not a Stateville alone problem. We heard that people were not aware of this in the prisons, but actually we had an outbreak of actual cases at Pontiac about 2 years ago. They never did, or at least they never admitted publicly that they did, find the source of that bacteria that had gotten in, but they did admit that 2 prisoners had in fact come down with Legionnaires disease at Pontiac, so it must have come from somewhere. And there, all they did was test the water outside of the prison, so at the source, not at the faucet level. Somebody, I think, put in the chat asking about the water tower. The water tower is specific to Stateville. It does not serve the remaining community. I think every prison in the state has its own water tower just to serve the prison. Certainly every prison I visited has a water tower. In fact, if you don't quite know where you're going, that's the thing I always look for, is a water tower on the horizon. Say, aha, that's the prison over there, and head for that. So yeah, every prison has its own water tower. You know, in some senses, that's a safety issue so that they can control the water that comes in. Nobody can sort of spike it from outside the prison. But in a situation like that, that's happening now, it means that the danger is located only in the prison. And unfortunately, that means it gets a lower priority than if it was impacting the whole community. You know, if they had this kind of outbreak in the city of Joliet, they'd be doing a lot more than they're doing right now. But because these prisoners, so, you know, who cares? And I certainly second what Alexandria said earlier. IEPA needs to be in there testing every prison in the state. They found 5 prisons, NRC, the reception center, which is next to Stateville and at least shares some of that water system. And I believe the same water tower, but I'm not sure of that. JTC, which is the old juvenile center, which has now been converted into a mental health center. So that's where we have some very vulnerable, very seriously mental ill people are housed at JTC, at Stateville, of course, proper, at Graham, which is one of our other intake centers. So people coming into the system are exposed at Graham. And I'm afraid I don't know what I've forgotten what the 5th one is. And then there have been continuing complaints about water at Pontiac and at Vienna and at Shawnee. Those are the ones that I know of that have serious problems. We know in the past that Dwight Correctional Center for Women had very serious water problems, and that's one of the reasons they ended up closing it. Because among other reasons, they found that it would be more expensive to tear up all those pipes and put in ones that weren't leaking. Anybody who's walked through the grounds of Stateville in the wintertime has seen steam coming out of the grass. And the reason that happens is because the steam pipes are all corroding and they have holes in them. And that allows steam, which heats all the prison. There's a big boiler, and then the steam pipes go all under the ground to the individual housing units and workplaces, et cetera. So those are the steam pipes. Those are all corroding. Anybody who's walked back into the plumbing chase behind the cells in what used to be B house, is now B, C, D, and E house, knows that there is water not quite pouring down, but rapidly leaking down out of those pipes. At sometimes there have been a real, what looks just like a river flowing at the bottom of there, along the bottom. So that's another place that stagnant water is sitting, which then can get into all the cell houses through the air. So IEPA needs to do a thorough examination, from my point of view, of every prison in the system. And the fact that Illinois Department of Public Health has no jurisdiction over the prison system is a serious problem. It's a problem we've seen throughout COVID, that they therefore had to get secondhand information from IDPH in order to then translate it through the IDOC administration. Then finally something got happened in the cell houses. IDPH should have been in the middle of that from the beginning, but they don't have jurisdiction. That is a problem that either the governor or the legislatures can solve, and should. Both of those things are completely within the control of the governor. And if the governor doesn't act, I mean, these are both executive agencies, right? So all the governor has to say is do it. They will tell you all about how they have to have intergovernmental agreements and this and that and the other thing. It's hard and it's expensive. None of that's true. If the governor says do it, it happens. He's in charge of both agencies. He can just tell them to do it. If you leave it to the individual agencies, then they can do whatever they want. And somebody has to step in from higher up to make it happen. And the IEPA already has the jurisdiction. They just, like everybody else, unfortunately, discount prisons and leave it at the bottom of their list of things to do. Again, that doesn't take any legal change or anything else. It just requires somebody paying attention. And I think what we've seen in the last month is that they better start paying attention.
Thank you, Alan. So that was our briefing of what's going on. I know some folks have already put some questions in the chat. I just want to open up space for any other questions or clarifications before we're going to dive in together and actually take some collective action, actually several collective actions right now together around this. So you didn't just hear about it. We're actually going to do something about it. How bad, okay, Menard was opened in the late 1800s like Pontiac. How bad is the water quality at Menard? My loved one has a mass on his kidney and has had COVID twice while at Menard. Both are evil places and should be shut down. Water quality at Menard, Mark or Alan, or other folks that potentially have been to Menard.
Well,
I can tell you two things about it. Mark can tell you what's happening inside from them. What I can tell you is that Menard is not among the prisons that they have tested in the last 6 months, maybe as long as a year. It's a blank. So we don't know from any objective standards. I'm sure Mark, like us, have heard those complaints though. Mark, I turn it to you for that one.
well, the problems at Menard deals with abuse at the hands of guards and how people are being treated that are housed in the segregation units at Menard. They have other issues such as rodents, which all the prisons have those issues, but they have a very, very serious issue with abuse at Menard Prison. And I'm saying this over and over because I know that we have heard this, and prisons is a mess. Getting out of prison in 2009, I jumped right into trauma because that's what it is. It's additional trauma in trying to confront some of these issues. But definitely Pontiac Prison it has decayed. The same way with Stateville. I often tell people, well, don't touch anything in Stateville because it may fall. See, because it's that old and it's literally put together off of toothpaste holding that facility together.
Yeah, so unfortunately, there has not been an official test in Menard, and so we can only imagine what's going on in there. But I can tell you, like every other prison, there is definitely stagnant water in places. And so I'm sure it has the recipe for something like Legionella bacteria to grow and proliferate. So are there any other questions, comments? I am going to go ahead and drop the action toolkit in the chat box. So if you could open up the chat box and click the link, and that should open up. Betty, my takeaway from what Mark, Alan, and Alex are saying is that the infrastructure for prisons mentioned are self-contained and not linked to the communities nearby. Yes, they are directly impacting the prisons, which includes, I will say, staff members that are in the prisons and people going in and out. And so if something can be spread, it will be spread.
Yeah, but remember, the staff for years have not drunk the water. They have
Oh,
brought in bottled water for years.
yes.
And they tell me when I tour, oh, don't drink that water. We'll buy you a bottle. They will buy me a bottle of water to prevent me from drinking the water as I tour through these prisons.
Yeah.
Which sends a pretty strong message that they don't think it's safe.
And that has continued since at least, I would say, the late 1990s, I can remember guards being allowed to bring in water. And, you know, Statesville is just a mess. And I think we as a whole, we need to demand that Statesville be closed along with all of these degrading prisons.
Yes. We need to demand release, transfer where necessary. We need to close any place that has inhumane conditions. We know that's a long path, but potentially bringing noise and momentum and education and awareness around these very urgent issues could hopefully speed up any processes. Because though we might say the path to closing these is a long path, but the path to someone getting Legionella and potentially being hospitalized is a very smaller timeline that we understand must be addressed urgently. And so this is being recorded. This will be shared with press. This will be shared with our lawmakers and sent to the governor as well, because again, he is able to say, Illinois Department of Public Health, go inside the Illinois Department of Corrections and do a full assessment. And so we want him to know that we believe he should do that. So again, if I put the link in the chat, let's take some actions. We're going to be calling y'all. We're going to be doing some emails. So I'm not going to take y'all too much on social media. I'm going to stick to mostly calling and emails. So if you are having trouble getting onto the link that I put in the chat, please let me know. But this is the toolkit. This is what it looks like. This is just the background that we gave to y'all. We put this in here because we want y'all to copy this link, this toolkit link, save it on your computer and share it with others, okay? Please share this with others. Send it in emails to people who you think would take this action on their own. This is the sample script that we will be using throughout this entire toolkit. So you will be using this same script over and over again, so you don't have to worry about finding another one. But hey, if you understand what's going on here and you want to personalize it, go for it, right? But we understand that most folks just want something that's given to them. So it's introducing yourself as an Illinois resident, calling on regards to the water conditions have been found in many prisons, extremely concerning drinking water. Legionnaires disease afflicts and kills more people in the United States than any other reportable waterborne disease. We're calling on behalf of our loved ones who are incarcerated to see urgent action. These conditions are beyond deadly. If no action is taken on this urgently, our coalition will take further action to hold the Illinois Department of Corrections, IDOC, and the governor's office accountable, right? We will not stop talking about this disease and bacteria that is very present in our prisons. And so what you're going to do is you're going to start with, it says email your lawmaker. You're going to start with this link right here. So if you're on it with me, go ahead and just feel free to click that link with me right now. I am going to put this link again in the chat box. There isn't a short link, so if it's not letting you copy and paste it, let me see. I can try and make like a super short link for y'all super quickly. But if you're able to just hop on and start sending that email, please do. I will make a short link really quickly for folks that are having trouble copying and pasting. See how quickly I could do this. Okay, it's not going to be like the prettiest, but it is going to be shorter. So you will still copy and paste, but it is shorter. And so that little bit.ly link should bring you to the toolkit. So when you've sent this email, so it'll open up to this, you're going to put in your information here and then click start writing, and it will auto populate the email for you. So when you've done that, please just put in, let me know you're done. Let me know that you've done that. Hey, look at folks working fast. Take your time, no worries. Don't feel like you're going behind. You have access to this toolkit the entire time. So yes, first step is email your personal lawmakers and make sure that they're aware, right? They were all invited to this emergency briefing. They should all be aware that this is happening now. They need to hear from their constituents. This will send to your representative and your senator. Great. Great to see folks are being able to do this. Go ahead and do it. It should take you just a couple minutes. The next thing on our toolkit is to call and email the Illinois Department of Corrections. So what we're doing today, folks, we are flooding the Illinois Department of Corrections and the governor's forms on their website with this issue, right? Even 26 of the same emails will look like it's being flooded. So please, you will next then click here to submit a form. It will open up here. Let's see. You're gonna just go ahead, name, email. You can put your phone if you want to, and then you're just gonna go ahead and copy and paste this script right here into the support form, right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy. I'm going to paste it. I'm going to delete that part because that doesn't make sense. I'll just start with, I am a concerned Illinois resident. General subject, let's say inmate and family concerns. I feel like, do you think they'll ignore it? Do you think they'll ignore all of them? Let's do that. Cool. You're gonna do that. That's literally gonna be the same thing with the governor. We are going to contact the governor. Let's see. We could do voice and opinion, or you could do scheduling request, y'all. We could try and schedule a time. You know what? I say go for either one. Do both. Oh gosh. Do I support? What do you say, Alan? None? Fix it? I don't know. And submit, right? It seems to be sending to the governor's office. Oh, into the Action Network email? Okay. We might have set it up for the governor. I think that's okay. Feel free to do that. I think that works as well. Feel free to go through the form on the website, do both. The more, the better. Because obviously, as we just heard from Alan, the governor is the one that has the power to do this the quickest. So I think that it's okay to have a little double duty and really flood that. And so we also then have the phone numbers on here for, this will go to the Illinois Department of Corrections, the medical director. You could just try and follow it through to leave a voicemail and just let us know how that goes. We've heard that some folks have not been able to leave voicemails, but I would say try your best, and that's also why we're flooding their form. And then here are the Springfield number and the Chicago number. So these are all of the actions. Are there any questions, or do folks feel like they could just tackle those action steps and make those calls? Can I get like a thumbs up if folks feel good about it? Cool. Alrighty, y'all. I am going to play a little bit of music for us, so y'all don't have to sit in silence. Feel free to mute it if you're making your calls. But yeah, y'all, if we all take these actions right now together, we will have over 50 notes into the governor and the Illinois Department of Corrections saying this is an issue and something needs to be done about it. So it might seem like we're quietly tapping away at our computers, but our individual action will make a very large collective noise. So thank you, everybody. Once you've done all of the actions, please feel free to go and do whatever you need to do for the rest of the day. But if you could put in the chat once you've done the actions so we can kind of keep note, we appreciate y'all greatly in time you're taking on this issue. I don't know, Mark or Alan, if you have any last words to folks as they do these actions.
Well, and I just want to make this clear to the families, all of the families. You are the true organizers. You already know what exists inside of these prisons. In order to stop this abuse, it's going to take a lot of people getting involved. Get the roaches in your house, if you have any, to please begin to come together and to mobilize against IDOC. These people have done some very cruel things. I have heard every cry that is imaginable. Please take the opportunity and let's band and stand together. Thank you.
Thank you.
The only other thing I was going to say is I think that communicating as much as we learned today to the people inside is a good thing. First of all, it lets people know that there are people out here who care. And perhaps even more importantly, there's so many rumors that go around prison. A few facts are always a good thing to send in. So, some of the information that Alexandria posted in the chat or on the toolkit should also go by letters, I think, into the prison itself so that they know what's going on.
Yeah.
You can't rely on the IDOC to tell people what's happening.
Yeah, they're definitely not going to tell them what's going on.
The best liars in the world.
Literally, the person probably in the cell next to the person in C house that's positive. It's like, you got to figure that out. Cool. Thank you, everybody. Please take time with us together here to finish doing these. You will get to a voicemail when you make calls. So don't worry about probably talking to anybody. But thank you all for coming here and taking these actions with us. And I will stay on here until 6 for folks that are still going through these different actions. So thank you all so much.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming in, Karen.
Alex,
Yes.
I wonder if I could ask a question while I've got you all on the phone here.
Yeah.
So thank you again for hosting this. This is incredibly helpful, and I'll be sure to actually get this to folks I know that are concerned and feeling very useless as to how to support the efforts. I'm wondering if you see any value. I know you and I, Alex, have talked about this in the past, but for any contacts or organization around visiting with some of the key legislators. So in particular, Senate appropriations for budget, so Aquino, or from the House, Representative Hernandez, or even the Speaker himself. Given that I think it's certainly, we can organize something around actions at their offices locally, or even trips down to down to Springfield, although I think session is very close to ending.
Yeah, I definitely think the lawmakers that have prisons in their districts, I think, should be targeted, as well as the governor. I think that could be by way through the speaker. I think specifically because you and your group are in his district. I think that is why it would make sense to say, we really care about this. And though you're very busy in these last days of session, the Senate has said that they're not going to look at or move anything that has opposition to it, which is extremely concerning. And I think that they've taken a lot off their plate, and so they have time to address this issue.
And can I just add, I think it's always a good thing to call your legislature about these, as many legislators as you can about this issue, because just in general, they always say, we don't hear from people who care about prisons. We only hear from those people who think that prisons are too soft. We need to lock up more people. We need to increase it. So I just always think the more people who are willing to talk to the legislatures and say, I care about people in prison, it's always a good thing. Whether or not it has any effect on this particular issue, it doesn't matter. There are an infinite number of issues that are going to come before the legislature in the next couple of years. And the more they hear from people who are in their districts in particular, who care about that issue, the more likely they are to move something.
Thank you, Alan and Alex. I just want to mention, Alex, I have actually met with the speaker subsequent to our first conversation you and I had. And he was willing to have folks come by as well, to hear more directly from families. I think what I was understanding from previous conversations was there's more of an urgent need, and I totally get it. I mean, your brief is sobering and just heartbreaking at the same time. I think what y'all are hoping to get is legislators that actually make their way down to some of these inhumane prisons to actually see it firsthand. And so I think if that is the direction of what this general group is trying to get to, that's where I'm trying to get kind of like an indication of, one, if that is the interest, and two, if there's anyone already organizing around that.
I think we're doing the most organizing around this Legionella at this point. I think, but that's not just like the folks that are on this call. I think when I say we, it's a little bit more broad. Definitely many organizations that went into, initial discussions about this, and are also still working to grow that outreach to more environmental organizations, because this is the work that I do, and I feel like that Alan and Mark, we're all very, connected with the prisoner rights types organizations and environmental organizations. This is such a strong intersection right now that we want to grow that. I mean, it's always such a strong intersection, but I feel like the urgency can bring us together. But all that to say, yes, Betty, if a lawmaker is down to address this with us,
and he was as could be expected. He's like, well, I can't have any direct impact. I said, well, Mr. Speaker, you can, because you can help us with the funding at the very least. So he was definitely willing to meet with people for sure.
Yeah.
And I think, to get him to move the needle to actually say, well, then I'll actually meet with people at the prison. That would be good as well. I also wanted to mention, I did see somebody mention Cassandra Greer. I did have the great, enormous privilege and pleasure of meeting her this past weekend. She was willing to also engage, and I know she's part of a lot of the effort that many people here are doing. So I just, because I sit in a part of Chicago that, it is the speaker's district. We would like to actually get more people engaged from our end.
Yeah, that would definitely be great. And I know I should have probably told everybody this before folks hopped off, but there is a follow-up call, like continued organizing around this issue. And so, by joining this meeting, also Christula definitely put some information in the chat for people to follow up with us. But we do have another meeting this Friday on Zoom at 4 p.m. And so if that's something, if you're still on this call and you're interested in being a part of that and available, please send me a message, because I will invite you.
I'll send you all a message for sure. And I thank you. I apologize for taking up so much airtime.
Oh, you're good. Alan, this bill passed the House. So now it's in the Senate, and it would allow legislators a legal right to enter. Did they not have a legal right?
They don't, and it's been a real problem. The Department of
That's the
Corrections
problem.
often controls access. So I know the representative who introduced this was Kelly Cassidy, who tried to get into Logan when there were reports of sewage water coming up out of the floor in one of the housing units, and they refused to let her in, but then they gave a tour to some people from the governor's office, including the governor's wife and a couple of friendly legislators. They gave them a tour, but wouldn't let her in. So she introduced a bill. The governor is the only one that has the absolute right to come into a prison at any time. So the bill is really simple. It just amends that to include members of the General Assembly. So yeah, it passed unanimously in the House and is currently waiting in the Executive Committee at the Senate. So I don't have to go anywhere in the Senate, but calls to senators would be useful to get. It's nice to make a demand they go in, but if they don't have the legal right to go in, it doesn't do any good. So getting them in there, giving them the right to go into, because we're paying for it, right? I mean, they passed the budget. They're paying for it, so they should have a right to see what they're paying for.
Yeah, not a lot, unfortunately.
For those that may want to help with the water drive at Stateville, if you have water that you would like to contribute, man, you can just contact me. Just walk outside and scream Mark. Mark will be there. Thank you.
Perfect. How are folks doing on these different actions? Were people able to make any calls? I know we've been talking this whole time, so get back to work, y'all. I think emails are definitely the easier way. So I've definitely seen folks sending emails. So I definitely appreciate that as well. And I'm adding emails as folks send them for Friday. So send them over to me. Sent messages. Thank you. Are water bottles being donated actually going to folks that are incarcerated? Unfortunately, we've seen like the only way we can tell that they're actually going. Go ahead, Alan. Thank you so much for your time. The water bottles, unless we like track them very carefully, we won't know, right? Because what has been told is that different correctional officers have been taking them, have been selling them, and they haven't actually gotten to someone who's incarcerated, but at some of them have gotten to people, like, and then that has been, you know, corroborated through like phone calls of like, can you tell me that you got these water bottles? How many of them did you get? You know, and that's the only way we actually know if these drives are effective. And unfortunately, they were happening. And then I think there was a little bit too much press potentially around what was going on. And so that's why Illinois Department of Corrections put a stop to that. Send emails and calls. Yay. Thank you, Tommy. Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Okay, I will play some music for folks as they finish. Thank you, everyone, for being here and supporting. Look out for further actions.
Question, what is your email, Alexandria, and your number?
It's alex@chicagovotes.com. And just send me an email. My phone number is on my signature.
Got it.
Alex, did you grab Anne's information from the chat, or do you want me to send that to you?
I got Anne's information.
Okay.
I don't think there's more than one Anne, so. Love it. Folks are working hard, huh?